Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 2:30, so we will start. Welcome to today's meeting of Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny. We'll get straight onto it. First item is apologies. Jonathan.
Received no apologies, Chairman.
So Charlotte Atkins is missing. Yep, is that the only person? Yep. Okay. Any declarations of interest from members? No? Okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April. Can we have sign those off as a true record? Graham. Can we have a seconder, please? Pippa. Just set the date, won't it? Okay, and then into the meat of the meeting, item 4, which is the Highways Transformation Progress and Performance Quarterly Update. This is an oral presentation. Over to you, David Walters.
Thank you, Chair. As you've heard, this is our latest quarterly update for the transformation programme. Although you'll have heard and seen the vision and the ambition outlined on the slide there, it's just worth a reminder of what these are and obviously the key link to the strategic plan and the 3 elements that make up that programme. Very much the first 2, part 1 and 2, the future highway delivery model and transforming our offer. They're really very much merging now following the signing of the contract extension of the strategic partnership. So I'm going to deal with them in 3 separate parts, but really parts 1 and 2 are very much merging together in terms of the transformation programme. Part 3, highway investment strategy. I think last time we came in March, either the cabinet paper had only just gone through, so there's an update on that, and we have got some additional investment as well from DFT on top of what we were expecting at that time. So the first bit, the future highways delivery model. Again, just a reminder, future highway delivery model illustrated in practice on this slide. Very top line political policy and direction set by Cabinet, who set the overall budget, the strategy, and then the operational priorities follow through the portfolio holders and obviously with the governance around that. The next tier, the commissioning client, will then take that budget and turn that into specification, service levels, improvement plan and performance management, which will include customer quality and value for money. And then beneath that, we've got a series of delivery functions. And we're very much in a hybrid model already. For example, if you look at the box on the left-hand side, the strategic partnership, that represents the partnership with Amy that we've got at the moment. Internal providers, we've got a number of internal teams, safety inspection teams, design teams, corporate teams as we move across as well. And then we've got other arrangements, for example, like our private finance initiative for street lighting, which runs until 2028. That was a 25-year period. So we've got a mixed economy at the moment, but this is about strengthening that mixed economy and giving us the even more flexibility to adapt as we go forward. It's a typical model that's now being used by a number of other Shire counties. Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Derbyshire operate at a similar kind of model, and they are generally recognised as being amongst the kind of peer group of authorities that we'll be able to benchmark ourselves against. In terms of the strategic partnership itself, at the last meeting we were able to provide an update that the decision to agree the revised terms for a contract extension had been published, and that followed the agreement of the new operating model approved by Cabinet in July of last year. Hopefully you will have seen a lot of communication around that both internally and externally, and that is a big milestone for the transformation programme. So since that time, what that's allowed us to do is enhance our engagement, particularly with the Amy senior management team within Staffordshire. We've been able to do some of that prior to the announcement, but obviously we wanted to make sure that the strategic partnership contract extension was in place first of all. So we've now set up a highway transformation leadership forum with both the county staff and the AMI senior management team in Staffordshire to progress the transformation. You'll also have seen, for example, on the Staff's Space webpage, we've set up an internal communication page, and there's lots of information on that, a reference site for information, both for members and officers to have a look at to see what those regular updates are in terms of the programme. So I'll go through it in a bit more detail, each of those elements. So there are three main elements that support the future highway delivery model. So the first is the new organisational design to deliver the future requirements and to support staff to move to the new ways of working. So currently we are in the process of reviewing the organisational and job design, which will then move into job evaluation consultation. That will be ongoing between now and May 2024, and then we'll start to staff the new structure through to October 2024, which is when the new contract arrangement with AMI comes into place. We've already started to prepare functional service plans to support greater oversight and control for the County Council. So this will very clearly set down the service levels that we expect to achieve, the standards of quality. We'll look at value for money, we'll look at customer satisfaction. The first phase of those will cover the footway, the carriageway, the drainage, the soft landscaping and winter service activity. We're expecting to have those drafted by the end of July of this year. Members will probably recall that in the last meeting at the committee, we did seek views on whether there's a role for the select committee in agreeing the annual functional service plans, and if so, what that would look like. So if it's okay, Chair, we'll come back to that at the end. So the final part on that slide is, big part of this is, Staffordshire is a digital first authority, and underpinning that is the systems that we use. And so we're looking at those systems to see how they will support the improvements that we want, whether that's better information being published, whether that's making it easier to find that information, or whether that's giving better updates on customers in terms of enquiries. So we're looking at that at the moment. We've got support from our ICT teams on that, and then once we've rescoped what the requirements are, we'll begin to look at whether that's changing the systems that we've already got or whether it's looking at new systems. So the second part of the transformation programme is what we're doing now to get ourselves ready for the future. So as I say, in practice, it's merging with the first part of the programme, which is the redesign of the operating model. So the first element of this theme is the design of improvements to the customer journey and the customer experience. The design stage for that is underway, and it's expected to move from design to implementation from October of this year onwards. You'll already see elements of that hopefully being improved, such as our highway activity, the pitching the message. There's a new corporate customer experience survey which is available not just for highway services now, but wider county council services. And there are a range of service improvements which I've listed on the bottom of the page that we will start to deliver from early autumn onwards. Just put some examples on there. So to improve the single front door for highways, improvements to the way that enquiries are dealt with and people can review what those enquiries are, website updates to publish more information, looking at chatbot functionality to see whether that can improve the ability for people to find information, and then customer satisfaction measures with further customer satisfaction methods to be introduced from March 2024. The second part of that programme, that's designed to implement an improved community offer in line with the member priorities, and that's by March 2024. So again, we've already started the design of that offer. Some of the first pieces of work we're doing are to look at the divisional highway programme and how that's delivered. Member-led identification of priority repair of category 3 defects, kind of calling that a two-tick approach, whereby we build on what we already do, which is allowing members to escalate in certain circumstances some of the lower risk category 3 defects. And of course we've got the £2 million that is being set aside from the additional DFT pothole fund that was announced in March 2023, which I know the community team is engaging with members across the county and to identify what those repairs are. So alongside the above, we'll also be looking at improvements to the three-tier working with districts and parishes, collaborative arrangements and other organisations, plus promoting self-help initiatives. So what can communities do for themselves and how can we make it easier for them to help do work and activities on the highway. So the final part, which is the biggest part of the update, is the investment strategy. So the final part of the programme is the delivery of that additional SCC investment alongside the DFT Highway Maintenance Block Grant, an additional DFT pothole fund, and also we've got the County Council's successful bid for the Levelling Up Fund grants. So current focus, as highlighted on that slide there, is completing the delivery of the 2022-23 additional investment, together with a further 8 sites that were identified in year from savings, which is the ones on the right hand side. That was a small number of sites where we'd got high friction surfacing that needed replacing, typically around junctions or pedestrian crossings. The 3 sites on the left hand side, they were the 3 sites that were part of the initial investment last year. Uttoxeter Road and Stone Road Holmcroft were schemes that were already on the ground before the end of the year, and Walton Roundabout is the last of the programme from last year's investment to go on the ground. That's all been going alongside the 22-23 minor capital maintenance, which was £5 million, the repairing places programme and the work stack reduction, and again we're completing the delivery of that over the next month or so. Once we've done the repairing places work, and I think the last piece of that work is the A34 Liverpool Road, Newcastle. What we will do then is have a look at what that's told us in terms of future investment decisions. So repairing streets, repairing places as opposed to repairing defects, and actually repairing larger defects, doing larger areas. That will help us to then inform future investment as to what it would cost to move to that model across all our activities. Some of that's quite significant. I mean, for example, some of the repairs we've been doing on the repairing places, whereas we might typically repair a couple of square metres, we've been doing 10, 15 square metres in places, which is really good, but obviously it's a lot more costly, so we need to make sure what that looks like if we were to scale that up. So alongside the capital programme for 2022-23, we did make available some extra revenue funding towards the end of last year as a result of a projected underspend on staff whilst we go through the highway reorganisation process. And again, I'm not going to go through the detail list, but that is the list of activities that we've completed. One of them, probably the most visible, was the early season grass cut in March 2023. We've been continuing with the gully emptying project, which again has been very much focused on locally identified drainage issues. The deteriorated high friction surfacing, which I referred to on the previous page, and we've also done some localised repair of road markings and pedestrian railings, very much again focused on priority routes into town centres, so they're really visible. Moving on to the new investment, really good news, the level of investment over the next 2 years, £30 million over that 2-year period, nominally £15 million per annum. There's £10 million of that to be spent on key gateways and local junction roundabout repair programme. That's 17 sites, I think, identified on that screen. They will be delivered across that 2-year period. Bulk of them will start to be delivered from the autumn onwards, as we get the design done and as we increase the resource available to do those. That will be alongside, there's approximately 1.3 million of structural maintenance funded from the DFT Highway Maintenance Block Grant. All the details on the actual programme for that are in the cabinet paper that we published back in March. So the County Council earlier this year, as I referred to earlier, we were awarded 19.8 million from the government's Levelling Up Fund 2. An element of that was also structural maintenance. 5.76 million pounds of that was structural maintenance scheme, which again we will deliver over the next 2-year period. It's front-end loaded in this year, and the first of those schemes, Avon Road, Cannock, should be going on the ground in the next few weeks. But I've listed the other sites on there as well that will be delivered over that the full 2-year period from the Levelling Up Fund. Early intervention, we talk about this a lot. Early intervention with preventative surface treatment typically adds 10 to 15 years of life to the road network. And we're putting £8 million worth of additional investment, which will see around 45 kilometres of roads locally repaired to then receive surface treatment. Some of the surface treatment will take place this year, some of the surface treatment will take place next year, but the vast majority of the patching work to get those ready will take place this year. So we'll see that really visibly during the period of this financial year. That will be delivered alongside a further £32 million programme of preventative treatment, which we expect to fund from the DFT maintenance block grant across the 2 financial years. So again, it's significant. I think we're talking, the latest programme somewhere between 400 and 450 roads across the county this year that will receive preventative treatment. So a big visible presence on that across the county. And again, the latest programmes for that are available on the website. Alongside that, we've also got what we call the £5 million minor capital maintenance budget, which helps to support the day-to-day activities, which will allow us to do more pothole repairs, more patching for even more surface dressing in future years, and typically around 200 minor drainage defect repairs, replacing ironwork, for example, or a localised replacement of a gully or pipe work. Final parts of the programme funded through the County Council's capital investment. There's an extra £1 million going into dealing with flooding and drainage issues, and that will be delivered alongside the nearly 1.6 million that is expected to be funded from the DFT maintenance block. There's several larger projects listed there, and then we're working on the rest of the programme at the moment. Some of that will be kind of fairly minor drainage repairs that come up during that 2-year period. So we will publish the larger information, the larger sites, but a lot of that it tends to be smaller localised drainage repairs as well. And the final bit, which is really helpful, £250,000 to invest in the identification, site investigation and design of future structural maintenance schemes, so that subject to there being investment in highways, additional investment in highways in future years, we'll be able to hit the ground a lot earlier. It typically takes 4 to 6 months to do a site investigation, design, and then start delivery. So we will have a group of schemes ready to go if we get investment in year 3, so to speak. So that's really good news, and we are at the moment securing extra resource to do that. We've also had an announcement in March on top of the DFT block maintenance grant, a further £4.4 million, £2 million of which I referred to earlier on will be going towards a member prioritised pothole repair fund. The engagement and agreement of those works are in progress, and I'm hoping most of the members in the room have already had some contact over that from the community teams, and then we will start to expect to see works go on the ground from about around July onwards, and that will continue throughout the year. The balance of that 2.4 million, again, we're putting an additional programme in place of a small number of additional key gateway and junction resurfacing sites. So these will be where we've got failed high friction surfacing, again, typically roundabouts, junctions, what we would describe as mini resurfacing schemes. So they'll be delivered during this financial year. Final part in terms of investment, in the same way that we recognised in the previous financial year, we would not spend all the staff budget whilst we go through the highway reorganisation. We're also put money aside at the beginning of the year this time for some further activities in year. So we've already set aside money to do an extra grass cutting March next year, March 2020-24. The community team will start to work with district councils and members and parishes on edging out and clearance of debris and vegetation from carriageways and footways. There's a little bit of challenge around that at the moment in terms of resourcing, because obviously the same people are very much involved in the pothole work at the moment. We normally do 1 weed spray per year. We are going to do 2 extra weed sprays this year. The first one's already been completed. And then one of the issues that we have often with drainage is drainage often involves adjacent landowners, third parties. So we are going to fund some extra staff resource to engage with those third parties and try and solve some of these drainage issues that are on land that's off highway. That's the final part of the investment. A big part of the overall transformation, and I think this slide was presented last time as well, is the communication of the transformation and the investment. That's an absolutely key part, not only doing it, but telling people what we're doing it, or as I describe it, tell people what you're going to do, tell people what you're doing, and then tell people what you've done. We've started that with all the communication that was around the Highways and Transport Capital Programme in March of this year. It's designed to be proactive, positive, informative, real-time, ongoing, and also, for example, making sure that members have got the right information at the right time to be able to use social media and other outlets. So there were a couple of questions which I'd suggested we might want to think about. One is in relation to these functional plans. So these are the service level agreements that will describe how we are going to deal with drainage, how we are going to deal with grass cutting. It will set the service level. A big part of the new model is for those to be very much visible to members, very much involved in that sign-off process on an annual level, so that we are clear what we are providing. And one of the questions for committee was, is there a role for this committee in that scrutiny process? And then the second element, are the planned improvements to deliver the new member offer correct, or have we missed anything? So that's it from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions? Graham.
Thank you, Chair. 2 things occur to me. One, you're building the GIS system, which will have all your assets all mapped out, including problem trees and things like that. How close are we to having seeing that in fully developed? And my second question is, as we're moving towards this new relationship with Amy, what's feedback from our staff, our engineers, about how Amy are they changing their behaviour? Are they responding to requests from our engineers to get jobs done? Because I think that's going to be key to this future working. So it'd be really nice to get some feedback to this committee about how our staff at the coalface are finding the contractors. Thank you very much.
So the GIS system, that's one of the systems that we're looking at as part of the wider IT review. So we're in that stage of defining what that new system looks like, what those changes need to be. So I would expect if we are making changes, which we will be, they will start to emerge from the autumn onwards. Now the GIS may be a fairly quick win, because we have got a significant amount of information that's not in CAD Core at the moment, which is our core county council system, but it does exist in, for example, Confirm. So one of the questions will be, how can we, and we know we can, how can we pull that data out of Confirm? And so, for example, gullies are plotted in Confirm. It would be really good for us to move to a system a bit like street lighting, where when there's a problem with the gully, you can use the gullies on the report it system, and you can report the problem against an individual gully. Now, we know there'll be the odd occasion where there aren't gullies plotted, we know that. But that would be an example of what we would see as an improvement that will make it easier. So instead of people having to find on the map which gully they're talking about, the gully will be plotted. And we're doing similar for, we've got other asset types like traffic signs, for example, that we've got the information, but we've got to think about how we pull it across into the corporate system. So I would think in the autumn you'll start to see some improvements on that. The second one, relationship with AIM. So what we're doing at the moment as part of the transformation, there's a cultural survey taking place at the moment across all the county council's team and Amy's team. So we'll get that kind of anonymous feedback from across our teams. My perception is I think the relationships are changing because the delivery model is changing. And as I described earlier, we're in the early stages now of being able to engage with Amy senior management and Amy workforce. Now we've got that big milestone out of the way in terms of the contract extension. That's kind of held us back a little bit in that contractually, but we're now moving to that stage where absolutely the teams are working together even closer than they have been traditionally. The relationship is changing. That's a fundamental of the model. So the relationship is changing now.
Quick follow-up, Chair, if I may. We'd really like to, I would certainly like to see that, Chair, the results of that survey, of particularly our staff. If not the whole thing, but if we can have a summary of that so that we know what our staff actually think. Because one of the frustrating things as a county council is you speak to our member of staff and then nothing happens for some time and you're not quite sure what it is because maybe the contractors actually haven't understood and you don't get that. And so sometimes you can sense that things aren't as good as we expected them to be. And that's probably just a time lag thing. But I just think from talking to other councillors, I know other councillors also have this frustration. So it's really important that we understand better how our staff think about what's going on. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Chairman. 3 points. Firstly, I was interested looking at the capital and lesser major projects that we've got listed there. One of them is in my division, which would appear to have been something which was planned and budgeted for 2 years ago, and it's been pushed on and pushed on and pushed on. How much of the work which we're looking at, particularly on major projects, are deferred projects from previous years for which we had funding available and the money wasn't spent on that project? The second point I would like to make is regarding preventative maintenance. Now, you mentioned that in the presentation, but I didn't recall in the presentation any reference to working with landowners on how we're going to be able to prevent roads being badly affected by flooding because of the ditch situation has been left to go fallow and is not being actively cleared. But in other forums, we've been told that there is funding available for action to be taken with landowners regarding the clearance of ditches. And the last point I was going to make was regarding the members' DHP fund. Now, my view as far as the DHP fund is concerned, that I will not use that for subsidising the council budgets to fill potholes. As far as I'm concerned, the things that I've been able to do within my division is to use my DHP fund cumulatively to deliver major projects within my division. That's all very well, but the money which has been allocated out of my budget from last year, and in fact the year before, hasn't been spent simply because there are not the resources to deliver the DHP projects within the amount of staff that's available. I want to look at traffic management, and the team that look at traffic management, we've had a meeting and no response, and that's now a year ago. I find it very, very difficult in working with parish councils and with the community in general in trying to say we're looking at how we can improve this, how we can manage that, how we can look at a problem. I had a complete survey done of traffic movements through all the major roads in my division when I first became a councillor, which was some 10 years ago. I've now had my third one completed, but that took so long to do that it was almost 12 months in the making. And so we don't seem to have the resources to deliver on those things which are, to the local member, essential. Thank you.
So the forward programme, we always have what we call the candidate programme, which we've got for covers a period of 2 to 5 years, essentially, carriageway and footway. Obviously then when we get the capital allocation, and up until the year before last when we had the first of the additional investment, that's very much been funded by the DFT block maintenance grant, and we have continued to spend the majority of that money on preventative treatment because that adds life to a far greater percentage of roads. So it does change, the programme will change. These are the sites that are to be funded from the additional investment over the next 2 years. If more money were to become available, for example, through the DFT Pothold Fund, we targeted that on additional, again, high friction surfacing sites, local junction improvement sites, stuff that's very visible, locations that are used by a lot of people, which the preventative programme doesn't address because preventative treatment doesn't really work on high stress locations like junctions and pedestrian crossings and traffic signals, that kind of location. Landos, you were talking about ditches being badly affected by flooding and affecting preventative treatment, etc., and preventing causing damage to the carriageway. So we have set aside, I think it was in one of the later slides, some money to put additional resource in to carry out enforcement activity against adjoining landowners on drainage issues. So that would include where we, for example, identify that ditch courses are the responsibility of the adjoining landowner. So we will start to tackle those as we go through the year. And then the final point around the member DHP, again, one of the things we're looking at in the review is, so how are the various elements in the DHP programme delivered at the moment? And there is quite a variety across the county council. Say some members will use it for additional patching works, other members will use the money for traffic management. So there is a real mix across the county. One of the things we do is looking what is that mix, and what is how can we organise ourselves and resource ourselves differently to be able to deliver more of those activities in a different way. Now that might mean, for example, that a lot of the feasibility studies for some of the traffic management are done by the design team at the moment. Maybe that in the future they're not done by the design team, they might be done by the community team, so that we can get a lot more of these activities on the ground quicker. It may be that we look at, if you're having a traffic regulation order, instead of doing a formal order, we may look at doing an experimental order, which would allow us to get it on the ground quicker. So absolutely a big part of looking at the way we organise ourselves to do our work differently in the future is the DHP programme. We've recognised that, and we are at the moment looking at what are the different ways that we can organise ourselves differently to progress more of them and more of them more quickly.
There's two things really. One is that we're told, as far as our DHP fund is concerned, if you don't use it, you lose it. But if the county can't provide the resources to deliver what we're looking for, that's unreasonable to argue that if you don't use it, you lose it, because we are actually trying to use it and the county can't respond to our requests. And the other thing is, I was a little bit surprised where we're under pressure as far as staffing is concerned to find that we've got staff allocated to adjoining authorities.
So, I mean, so the AMI strategic partnership is flexible in both ways, that we will both call in design staff for top-up work or areas of specialism that we don't have at the moment. Like we don't have a very big drainage team in Staffordshire, for example, to do drainage design. It's quite specialised, so we will call resource in to do that. Some of the structures work we will call resource in to do that. There are times when some of the design team will also be engaged in other activity. One, it does generate income for the partnership in terms of overheads, but it does also allow some of those staff to go and gain skills in areas of work that they're not perhaps currently dealing with, allowing them then to come back into Staffordshire with that extra knowledge to be able to do more of the work within Staffordshire.
And if you don't use it, you lose it.
Well, the capital, I mean, it's capital money, so, I mean, we should, you know, if it's not, it's funded from the Integrated Transport Block, I believe, the member Divisional Highway Programme. So if we're not spending it holistically across the year, we ought to be able to carry it forward. But I will take that away and check whether that's correct for you or not.
Sam?
Thank you. I have to agree with what David says about the DHP money. I've got a resident waiting for a drain cover to be replaced. It's been nearly a year now, and I've asked if I've lost the money as well, because we've always been told that that money, once it's gone, once that year's gone, it's gone. This resident stopped answering me now because he's fed up of I've just had to say it is happening, you just have to hang on. So I do agree with what David says completely. My other question is, I've got 2 areas in my districts that have block paving, and I don't have a team, because it belongs to county, I don't have a team that can go out and clear that block paving, because nobody will take responsibility for it, because there's no actual physical team there to do that work. And I just wondered if something's going to be incorporated in that, so I can say this area, it's an elderly area, it's full of weeds, these people can't walk around because they use wheelchairs and etc. And I just physically cannot get anybody to deal with that area. I'm actually looking at asking someone if they want to come out on a team build to be able to physically do that. And I just wondered if that's going to be something in with your weed spray.
So it's, I mean, we should be doing edge of carriageway and edge of footway. We wouldn't generally, I think, spray the whole of areas of block paving. But it is part of what we're looking at, this 2-tier, 3-tier working, which is, can that be done through working more closely with the district? And there's an element of money in to do that this year. Again, more closer working with the district councils who are responsible for street cleaning, street sweeping. Can they do more of that? If they can't do it, can we do it through the parish? If they can't do it, can we do it through volunteer groups, for example, to improve the overall capacity to do that kind of activity?
Our local parish, we do have a handyman who's really, really good, and he'll go out and cut hedges back for us, sweep pavements for us. He's really good, but this is too big a job because it's been left for so long. It needs a skip, and district won't do it. I can't get anybody at county to do it, and I couldn't ask the parish handyman because it's far too much for him. So I'm just stuck with this area that I can't help these residents for.
If you send me the location, I'll have a conversation with the community team to see whether it fits into one of the activities they're doing.
Okay, thank you. And I've also got one more question, if that's okay. You know, you say you're looking at the staff and the moving of them. Will you be putting extra staff in if that shows up that it's required?
So there is additional money that was previously allocated for additional staff in various parts of the service. That was based upon very much where we expected to be a couple of years ago. The model has changed significantly. It's a far bigger transformation programme than we were kind of planning for at that point. So we're looking at the organisational design at the moment. One of the questions around that organisational design will be, if it costs more money, is that design affordable? So I can't really give you the full answer to that at the moment, but that will come out over the next few months when people say, this is what we think we need to deliver the service and the functional specification and the activity that's part of the transformation programme. The second part of that is, well, is that affordable as an organisation?
Thank you. One of the reasons I ask is that, I know I've brought it up a couple of times now, is that we're receiving all this money, but we don't actually have the feet on the ground to fill those potholes, to resolve those issues. And I was just a bit concerned that we're just going to sit on it and it won't. We've still got frustrated.
Just to clarify, Chair, on that, so the operational money is being spent and the teams are out there repairing the roads, putting in place the various schemes that you've seen. What David was referring to in the presentation was on the Staffordshire County Council client side and those gaps we've got in terms of where our resource and capacity is. And once we've done the full design of the functions, we'll know where we need the most internal county council capacity. But that's not the same as the delivery capacity on the ground, which is funded and happening.
That's fine, thank you.
Philip.
Yeah, I'd like to see our divisional highways managers have more control on our local issues. We're very good at reporting things, we're very good at giving them a list of priorities, but it's the delivery and it's the lack of delivery sometimes and the non-communication that's causing the frustrations for me and Utoxeter. And there might be a good reason as to why that's happening, but if nobody tells us, then, you know, we're managing expectations. And unfortunately, the public think that all I do in Utoxeter is look after the highways and potholes. But unfortunately, you know, we have a lot more to do. It would make it so much easier if Richard Raisin, who's my divisional highways manager, had more control over what, you know, what gets done and why it doesn't get done and what are the consequences of it not getting done. Now, we've had a guy in Stafford Road who's waited 13 years to have a drainage problem sorted. We were given a date. They didn't turn up, and I still now haven't been told why nobody went. And we need to know because, you know, this is a customer of ours who's disappointed. I mean, he was given apologies from the officer that came out to see him, and we thought we'd rectified it, and it was all good till nobody turned up. So now I've still got an ongoing issue that's, you know, well into 13 years old. The other thing I'm worried about is there's that, so my divisional... So my divisional highways team are good. We earmark our money from one year to the next. So I've got stuff from last year that I've earmarked to get done. Still hasn't been done, but the money's there to pay for it. I'm worried about the backlog of work that Amy haven't done from last year. The stuff in the capital programme in Utoxeter that hasn't been done. The TROs have been in place. We're still waiting for double yellow lines to go in strategic places, very important places to the public. I've earmarked money to have the white paint done on strategic roundabouts within Utoxeter. Still hasn't been done. I'm earmarking some more money this year to do another roundabout, which is significant to the local people. I really do try, and I know my divisional highways team are on the ball all the time. We know our roads very well, but we need some form of control over what happens. And the other thing is some of the streets in Utoxeter years ago were upgraded and have had paving slabs. We don't seem to have a supply of these paving slabs anymore within the county, so consequently they're being filled with tarmac, and now I'm getting complaints from local borough councillors and local residents as to why this has happened, and nobody has been able to come back to me and explain, you know, what's going on. So I'm very positive about the future, and I want it to work, but I think we need a little bit more control, I think, from my divisional team. And, you know, I welcome the planned improvements because I know one of the Bamford Bridge is on the capital expenditure for this year, and that's a strategic road for me. So I'm very positive. I really want it to work because I'm so passionate about getting my highway sorted. Thank you.
Pippa?
Hiya. I've got a couple of questions if I can. You mentioned a chatbot. I just wanted to check how the chatbot was going to work. Is it going to be is it multilingual, so will it be able to pick up different accents and nationalities? The escalation process, so at the moment we predominantly escalate potholes, but I wondered if that could relate also into pavements, because at the moment there's a stop on pavement repairs. So does it translate over onto pavements as well? You mentioned about the customer's journey. Is this the customer as in council staff, councillors, or is it referred to the members of the public? Because if it's the public, then a lot of their issues come via the My Staff's app. And the major complaint that we get on that side of it is we can't bulk complain about 6 potholes, it's 1 pothole at a time, unless they then raise it via myself and it comes through to the community team then. Which then follows into continuing with the customer's journey, that the scheduling side of it. So we've escalated it, we've brought it to the local team, and they're brilliant, the local team that I work with. They come back to us all the time, give us great feedback, but they always say, I'm waiting for a scheduler. When it's scheduled, I'll let you know. Well, I've been waiting for a pothole to be repaired. The inspector's been out, categorised it as category 1. I was going to be told when it was going to be repaired. I've drove past on the way here and the team are there, but I haven't been told that it was going to be repaired. So if that could filter in perhaps to the confirm dashboard some way that I could access it, that would potentially save a lot of work for the team and the communication between the schedulers and the highway officers to us. Thank you.
I'll quickly run through those. So clear accountability. So so the key part of the reorganisation is this functional approach, these functional specifications, and a more functionally aligned organisation. So if you take something like winter service at the moment and you look at who's involved in that across the teams, you've got the community highway teams, you've got one of the gentlemen in my team who orders the salt, you've got Amy doing the delivery, you've got somebody else managing fleet. It is spread across a number of teams. We want to bring that together and have accountability for that sitting in one team in one place. Now, we also want those teams to be geographically aligned so they can support the community teams. So it's a hybrid arrangement in the future, whereby we're trying to get the best of being efficient and effective in terms of delivery, but having that clearer responsibility for an activity, for a service, but also maintaining that geographical knowledge. So we're trying to do several things at the same time. But I think, you know, what you are saying in terms of having that clearer accountability, that ability to chase jobs through, to have that better visibility, that will sit in functional teams in the future. So there will be, you know, the plan is there will be a highway maintenance teams that will do everything from delivering the major carriageway programmes to looking after potholes in a particular area and everything in between, which we haven't really got at the moment. We will bring that all together and they will work even closer with the community team than they do already, and hopefully that will address a lot of those issues. Chatbot, don't really know yet. Yeah, we know it's been suggested on to chatbot, but we haven't had, I mean, language definitely in Staffordshire, as in a lot of the country at the moment. Now there's so many different languages, isn't there, being used. So yeah, I would assume that if we do end up with a chatbot, it will have to. Escalation process, footways, there isn't a stop on footway repairs. We've put a stop on footway replacement and resurfacing at the moment because of the massive broadband investment programme and the risk of the footways being dug up. I think we've got something like 17 different providers wanting to work in Staffordshire, all of which want to dig the footways up to put broadband in, which is really good news because you're getting a really wide range of providers knocking on your door wanting to give you broadband. But it's bad news from a highways point of view because they're digging up footway, and we don't want the footways that we're investing hard-earned money in to be dug up. So there's a real challenge in the moment between coordinating those programmes. So what we've said, we kind of think the peak of that will be in the next couple of years. So we've not put a footway programme together for repair and preventative, but we absolutely should be continuing to keep those footways safe like we do the rest of the network. Customer journey, yeah, absolutely. The kind of issues you're talking about, the system change, can we improve that to change the way enquiries are reported? That's part of what we're looking at. And the schedule, yeah, that's an interesting one. Again, as we increase the amount of work that we are doing, that is putting pressure on the scheduling teams. And Amy know that, and they are looking at bringing in more schedulers. challenges with the bringing more schedulers, and then we pinch them and put them in the traffic and network management team because it's a very similar role. So there's a tension again, and we've got to look at how we work on that together across the partnership to make sure we're not, you know, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. But we are aware of that, and Amy are aware of that, and are looking to bring in more schedulers to deal with this extra volume of work.
Graham, you can only speak if you've sorted your phone out.
It's switched off. Sorry about that. Somebody sent me a message with sound. I've never had one before. May I make a suggestion that when local engine, this is picking up on DHP money, but also capital, the spending of capital money, and then us perhaps losing it, that if our local engineer on the ground says, right, Amy, that's a gully, has to be rebuilt, you've got a month. You must start that work within the next 4 weeks. If not, it goes to a local contractor that staffs will bring in. If you can't do the work, it goes to a local contractor, that's it, you've lost that job. I think that's fair, giving them a month. I also think it would cover, listening to what all these other councillors have said, it would cover a lot of those issues off. Just a suggestion.
I'm sure David can't answer that question right now.
Would you like me to?
Go on then, Philip, if you want to have a go.
Yeah, that's why it's a matter of policy, really, that, isn't it? So I'm happy to speak to it. Yes, we can look at that. I mean, the contract renegotiation is about putting more power in our hands in terms of how work's delivered, whether that's delivered by Amy, by a third party, or whether we bring it back in-house. So, yes, we can absolutely explore that. And just a couple of broad comments as well. A lot of the things that we've discussed today relate to capacity, and the key driver of capacity is people. One of the biggest challenges that we've had in recent years, and it's going to be a challenge going on into the future, is recruiting the people to do the work, whether that's Amy recruiting them or recruiting them directly into the county council, as evidenced by some of those schemes of opportunity we were able to deliver earlier this year because we hadn't spent our recruitment budget, because we couldn't find the people. So what we have to do is to make it as attractive as possible to work in this sector, whether it's for us or for third parties. That's one of the key reasons why we've pushed out our budgeting to a 2-year plan, so that both for businesses operating in the sector and for people thinking about their careers, they can see that there's some longevity there, rather than it being ad hoc funding on a 1-year basis. We'd like government to pick up the ball on that and give us a long-term settlement to help, but we're getting that going. But the other thing that we have to do is to prioritise as well. So there are lots of things that we'd like to be able to do. If we're not able to do all of them, we have to look long and hard about which things do we do, in what order, and that's all within that realm of policy setting. But the overall direction of travel, I think, is clear, and it's been good to hear colleagues discussing that element of it, that what we're trying to do, so to make this more responsive to what our customers want, with elected members being the super customers within that, being more transparent and communicative, and also putting more heft behind it in terms of more investment so we can get more done. So that's all very good to hear. But back to the original point, yes, we can certainly look at that, and we're inviting other suggestions for improvements.
Thanks, Philip. Before I bring Pippa back in, I agree with what you said, David, about better alignment of gangs doing repairs. There was a repair done in Tamworth town centre the other day. The team had travelled from Stoke. That's 60 miles. It's really not, it's not very good for our carbon footprint for a start. The frustration with Sam as well, with block paving being replaced by tarmac. It doesn't look good. If we've got lovely block paving through our town centres and cobbles, that's what we want it replaced with, not filled with tarmac, because it looks awful and it doesn't last. And the only other question I had on one of the slides, I think it was the levelling up slide, can you just explain why there's just Cannock and Stafford on there and no other areas were chosen to have any of those fundings?
So yeah, so the Levelling Up Fund was primarily improving connectivity between Stafford and Cannock, and it includes a wider package of cycling and walking and bus route enhancements. There was a limit, I believe, on what you could apply for in the Levelling Up Fund in the first place, so you couldn't apply for it for all the districts in the county council. So we did focus on Stafford and Cannock as being the best opportunity that we had to secure the maximum amount of money possible. So yeah, that is part of a bigger package of, in effect, connectivity improvements between those two major locations in the county.
Thank you. Pippa, quickly.
Just quickly, you've mentioned about the connectivity project. I think that really needs to be pushed on the communication side of it, especially with the Avon Road element. That's a major road through Cannock Town that's going to cause quite a lot of disruption, and with it just being in the newspaper from how I've seen it, it needs much more social media as a positive spin as well about what it's bringing to the town. And like you mentioned with regards to the safer road crossings, that's the push that we need locally. Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? David? Bernard even.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really going to say how bad it is for us councillors when, you know, in our own divisions, people are coming in with complaints. What it's like for 62 county councillors to get in touch must be horrendous. But what I was going to say was that when we do get some complaints, a lot of them are about the standard quality of the work that's already been done. Especially when a pothole has been, say, worked upon, within a few months, it has to be done again. Now, I would say that if we can't get the standard of work that we require, then the person, which is Amy, who puts it down, should pay for the repair of that work that is, in our opinion, substandard. That's what I would like to see, Chairman, because somewhere along the line, we're talking about serious money here for the future, and that needs to be good quality work that needs to be done. We can't waste that money. So consequently, can we get some kind of agreement with Amy whereby if work they've already done fails within a short amount of time, that they pay for it themselves to put it right? Thank you, Chairman.
David, Darryl, did one of you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's a number of reasons why. So I think, first of all, is, well, what did we ask for? And we have a range of repairs, so some will be, I'll use the word temporary holding, we don't like using that word, but in a life-expired road where you are simply placing hot material into a repair in an area that's already cracked and crazed, then it's not unusual that repair will not last very long. That's the nature, because that's what the Repairing Places programme is trying to do, which is to say, okay, so how much bigger would these repairs need to be to avoid that kind of issue? The functional specifications that we're preparing will be clearer about the quality that we are asking for. We will put wider assurance around the quality. For example, in terms of major schemes, we are bringing a clerk of works in, which is a role we haven't had for quite a while, who will look across the pre-patching for the preventative programme and also the major capital projects that we're delivering to make sure that we're getting that quality right. We do, where we identify, I can think of one I've dealt with a week or two ago, where work is wrong. We identify that, and the contractor that did it has gone back and done it again at their cost because we picked up that the specification was wrong. We're also putting we have a compliance officer that works for the County Council who, for the last 12 months or so, has very much been engaged in the Repairing Places programme. Now that we're completing the Repairing Places programme, that compliance officer will go back on to day-to-day assurance of quality. And a lot of this is part of this improved specification and the visibility of making sure that we're getting that quality in the specification that we've asked for.
Darryl, did you want to come in?
Thank you for that. Let me just say, on footpaths or pavements, where we have the slurry, that slurry seems to be a grand thing for grass to grow through. No problem at all. In fact, by the looks of it, there's various pavements within, say, Shares Hill, for instance, where I live, where grass is growing where it didn't grow before when there was no slurry on the pavement. So I think that's something which is, if you want to, where whatever you're putting on there with that slurry, it's not the right stuff, unfortunately.
Sam, did you want to come in?
Oh, it's just a quick question. You know, when the utilities come in and they fill their own holes, how long do you put on that before they can come back and not bother to repair it if they fail? Because I've got a road that's got utilities coming all the way along and that has failed, and I've asked my highways team and they've said it's too late now to get that. So now county are having to pay money to get that repair done, and I just wondered how long does it take for it to come back and be refilled, and can it be extended perhaps?
So it's either 2 or 3 years depending upon the depth of the reinstatement, with the proviso that if we, for example, did go and do what we call a core and find out that it never complied with the specification in the first place, then we can ask them to come back and do that. But generally, it's 2 or 3 years. As a sector, as a highway authority, we would love to have a longer guarantee period, and we believe that is appropriate. But we know that has been asked for by local authorities, but from a utility point of view, that's not something that they particularly want to adhere to. One of the things that has happened this year is, there are a number of, so we do sample inspections on utility excavations. We do 30% normally. There are a number of utilities that are not performing nationally at the required standard, and that has been upped this year so that we will get paid to go and do 50% sample inspections on some utilities, including some in Staffordshire.
Thank you. This is quite an old, and unfortunately every one of them's gone at the same time, so it just means now that we've got to pick that repair up, which seems a pity because it's obviously a fault in that tarmac for every one of them to have gone.
If you send me the location, again, I can look and see whether it's worth doing some further investigation.
Darryl, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to try and summarise some of the conversation, if I may, Chair. So first of all, thank you for the feedback this afternoon. Hopefully you'll recall some of the feedback you've given us previously when we've been taking this at the early stages, and you've shaped what the new model looks like. So things like the role of the local teams, having more power, more say, more grip, more control. That's exactly what we're designing in. The functional commissioning was something that got flagged here. And is exactly what we're moving to, and it starts to allow us to deal with the issues that were raised at the end there as well around if quality isn't good enough, how we can get things done again without us having to pay. So hopefully from the previous meetings and this one, all the issues you're flagging are being designed into this, but we've picked up on the issues that need dealing with now, particularly around DHP, pace, and getting that picked up more quickly, which is something we've been looking at for this year anyway. I think the big question we haven't really debated, and we need a decision at some point, is the role this committee will play in shaping those or signing off, or whatever the right word is, those functional level service commissions. It's fundamental that elected members have a role in that, because that means there's ownership politically as well as at an officer level of what it is we're saying we want to buy, at what cost, at what quality. Whether each one, and there may be 24 in the end, all come through this specific committee, or whether you set up a subgroup or whatever it is you think is right, that is something we need to decide at some point. And if there isn't time to debate and decide that today, it would be really useful if we could have a think about how we do that. As David Walters said in his presentation, there's a few that will get done earlier. So what we could perhaps do is bring one or two here in the first instance to kind of have that input, and then based on that, make a decision on the most effective way of dealing with those going forward. But I just didn't want to lose that from today's conversation, because it's really a really important part of the scrutiny process. Thank you.
So I'm just writing the question down. Okay. Philip, did you want to come in, or are you happy that Daryl's summed up?
No, I think that's a very good summary. Just two things. Firstly, on the point regarding utility companies, we think that they have far too much latitude at the moment, so we continue to lobby on that, both in terms of the permitting that allows them to do things in the first place and the quality of what they deliver and the durability of it. In terms of that scrutiny of the functional level servicing commissioning, if I put my teeth in, I think Daryl's recommendation is very pragmatic. I think taking a look at a couple as the full committee and then considering how you create a subcommittee to crunch through the rest seems entirely sensible to me. So that's all I'd like
Are we
to...
able to get any of those ready for the July meeting, Daryl? David?
There should be, yeah.
It's only because
whether
we've got a meeting in July with one item at the moment, so 2 items now. So that would be good if you could bring us a couple for July. Oh yeah, let's talk grass instead of potholes. Yeah, that's fine. And then we can work out the rest from there.
As long as we understand it's draft,
Yeah.
and it's more about that having a go at
Draft
it.
grass.
Yeah, exactly.
Or draft grass.
I know my southern accent,
Is it
apologies.
draft grass or draft grass? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, thank you, David, Daryl and Philip for your input today. You two are free to go, Philip can't. And thank you for listening and taking on board our comments. It does mean that we can transform the way we work and have a better working relationship with our contractors. Thank you. So we'll move swiftly on to item 5, which is the Staffordshire County Council's Economic Strategy Delivery Update. Philip.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chair. So it's nice to be able to do my item. Okay, so the committee considered the Council's Emerging Economic Strategy in October 2022, and we agreed that we'd bring it back here for review approximately 6 months later. So that's the purpose of the session today. And in particular, the asks of the committee are to consider the progress on that economic strategy since October 2022, consider the interventions that have already been made by the County Council and partner organisations, and to recommend any further interventions that the committee considers of benefit relating to the delivery of the economic strategy, and also to consider when the appropriate time would be to have the next update. And I'll just say at that point, apologies, I have hay fever, so I sound a little bit like I might have inhaled some helium, but it's actually, I think, the effects of Puritan. So I hope you'll enjoy my slightly less deep voice than usual whilst I give this presentation. So in terms of the update since October 2022, the strategy has now been made. So it is now in effect. In addition to the strands of the strategy that were consulted on, we chose, following feedback, to include innovation as a separate priority within the strategy. It was previously in the draft strategy embedded in all of the other priorities, but the feedback was that we needed to have it there as a standalone item. So you'll note that as the major change from the emerging strategy that you considered in October 2022. In addition to that, we have published a rural economic strategy which complements that overarching county-wide economic strategy and recognises the fact that by landmass we're over 80% rural, and in fact more than half of our businesses reside in rural areas. So we have that there as a complementary strategy. We've also delivered a visitor economy action plan, which has been prepared in collaboration with all of the other local authorities in the county area, and our destination management partnership, and has been endorsed by the Staffordshire Leaders Board in December. A little more on the visitor economy later on. And we are also in the process of developing a standalone skills and employability strategy, which is just in the final stages of consultation at the moment. So all of that activity all runs to a plan, which was that we wanted to set our overarching economic strategy and then pull out those really big building blocks that require their own treatment, and create strategies that stand on their own 2 feet for each of those. So with the employability and skills strategy, we'll be there in terms of setting all of that. So those are the big blocks that we wanted to put in place following the adoption of that overall economic strategy. In terms of the economy and the world that businesses are operating in whilst we've been doing this, we're all well aware of the big picture things that have been going on in that time. So the inflationary pressures on businesses as on individuals and households have been enormous. They have been ramped up considerably by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the massive uncertainty that that's created in the global economy. In happier news, the country's avoided going into recession. It's always interesting seeing those IMF predictions and then discovering how close they are to the mark, but it's good to see that that is the case, and inflation is now starting to fall, albeit it seems that perhaps that dip may be slightly shallower than we'd hoped. So we operate in challenging times. When do we ever not, you might say, but that's the big picture. The purpose of our strategies is not to look at those short-term issues. We have separate interventions where possible within the resources of the County Council and our partners to deliver them. Shorter-term strategy interventions that address those issues. The overall strategy is looking at the long-term, so that 10-year plus horizon. And so we're not intending through the interventions to deliver these key action points from the strategy. We're not specifically aiming to address those shorter term issues. We're looking at the longer term and where we want our economy to be by 2030 and thereafter. Just touching now on the priorities within the economic strategy, I'll just highlight a few things that we've done in each of those. But attached to the report, there is a broader, much more granular delivery plan, which you're welcome to pick things out from as well to discuss with us. But I'll highlight a few things from each of the priorities. So in priority number 1, town centre and high street regeneration, we continue to work both on our own account and particularly on the Eastgate development and with our successful Levelling Up Fund bid, but principally with partners in the districts and boroughs to deliver what's now approaching £200 million worth of central government funding through Levelling Up Fund, Town Deal and Future High Streets Fund. And that is one of our key work strands, making sure that we land that money into projects that are delivered on the ground within the timescale set by government. Now, I'm not going to try and rehearse all of those because I'll run out of breath. You'll all be very familiar, I'm sure, with a lot of that activity. We are putting our shoulder to the wheel in terms of making sure that we do all of the things we can to directly deliver that or to support that delivery where someone else is the prime delivery vehicle. In addition to that, I'm very pleased to say we continue to invest in enterprise facilities within our town centres. The Shire Hall, a short distance away from here, following its £2 million refurbishment, is now home to 15 companies. We have a small number of units remaining in there. It's also absolutely booked out in terms of hot desking space, which was the thing that we were really interested in trialling there. So the sort of WeWork environment that you see in cities, which we wanted to bring into our Shire town, and which I think it's fair to say we'll want to look at doing in other locations as well, those flexible business spaces for people who want to be in town for some of the week, but without the commitment of an office, which also adds to the vibrancy of town centres, brings more people in. Moving on to the workforce, higher skilled, higher paid workforce. I've mentioned that we are in the throes of developing our standalone employment and skills strategy. That is complementary to the LSIP, the Local Skills Improvement Plan, which has recently been published, which has been developed under the auspices of the Chambers of Commerce. We're not sure where that LSIP will end up, whether the document as it stands at the moment will be the final word on the matter. But we are producing our own body of work to complement that, to make sure we've got something that's fit for purpose for the county area. In addition to that, we are working on around 20 skills-related capital projects in the county. The Institute of Technology here in Stafford, a £16 million investment is scheduled to open in 2024. And we are working on other opportunities for skills and innovation spaces around the county. We're also delivering our Ignite programme, which delivers entrepreneurial skills to college students. We're continuing to deliver that. It's now benefited 13,500 students in Staffordshire, and it is unique to this county at the moment. It's something we've developed here, which we're very keen to offer to others around the country. But 13,500 students have benefited from that now. A couple of other things in this area, and then I'll move on. Our community learning service has had its Ofsted inspection in March, and it received a very strong good. The report only says good, inadequate, outstanding, etc. But from the feedback, we performed extremely well within that good category, and that is a service that's delivering enormous value to several thousand learners each year, and which we can be very proud of. And finally, the county has received over £4.2 million in funding from the National Multiply programme, which complements that community learning service that we deliver, to specifically focus on adult numeracy interventions, and that's aimed at people who don't have a GCSE level qualification in mathematics, of whom there are rather a lot of people in our county and indeed nationally, and that's aimed at providing a range of opportunities to improve your numeracy, from very, very light touch and low commitment schemes that would sort of help you with basic numeracy, all the way through to doing your GCSE if you don't have one already. So a lot going on within that area. Within the supporting startup and step-up business priority, we've delivered a wide range of business support programs. I'm not going to try and rehearse them all here because I think we're all fairly familiar with them, but we've supported many hundreds of people through those startup schemes. Also peer-to-peer networks to support people who are either in the process of or have set up their own businesses. The My Own Boss scheme, which supports entrepreneurs who would like some bespoke coaching, so something a bit more intensive, and we'll provide 6 hours of bespoke coaching with an individual to help them with the challenges that they've got in setting up their own businesses. Those efforts are really bearing fruit. So Staffordshire historically has been an area where if you set up a business, it tends to do better than the national average. The survival rates are better. But we had a lower volume of those than the national average in proportion to the size of our economy. I'm pleased to say that for 2021, which is the latest set of figures that we've got, we had 1,000 more businesses start up in Staffordshire than in 2020. And for the first time, we've hit the national average. And that does align with when we started to focus on this seriously as a county council. So I'm very pleased with that. And of course, all of those businesses represent livelihoods, both for the people who run them, but also for the people that are employed in them. And who knows where some of those businesses will go in the future. So that's very exciting. And the other thing that we are now focusing on is step-ups, so taking those startup businesses and then growing them. So getting them beyond 10 employees, which is often for anyone who's been in a small business. You push very hard to start to set it up and get it going, and then you go, goodness me, that was hard work, and it's very easy to stop at that point, and we're now trying to help those businesses to push on to become even bigger employers and bigger successes. Running through the last couple of priorities, and hopefully I'm not taking up too much time, Chair. You can hit the fast forward button if you want to. On innovation, we are pulling together the strands of the wide range of activity amongst businesses, but also our universities and colleges in terms of that activity, and we're trying to draw out the key strands of that we can elevate to a strategic level within the county. There are already some huge innovation projects happening in Staffordshire, and I'd highlight the Smart Energy Network demonstrator at Keele University, which is of international significance in terms of trialling the injection of hydrogen into the gas network, and also the innovation that's happening along the A50, A500 corridor in hydrogen. So JCB have recently received license from government to put their backhoe hydrogen-powered loaders onto the road network. Huge amount of innovation activity there that's already being commercialised, and that work continues. In terms of developing investment-ready projects, we are continuing to develop our own suite of future projects, as well as working with partners, principally the districts and boroughs, to help have those things on the shelf ready to go. We were talking about it earlier regarding highways, allocating budget to having schemes that are ready, so that if we are able to receive investment, we can get going. It's exactly the same principle with this. A good example of that we've already developed is the Chatterley Valley West site in Newcastle under Lyme, where the development there has recently got underway, having received investment from the Get Building Fund, and that was a scheme that we had there on the shelf, and we could work up quickly when a funding opportunity arrived. And we are working to build out a further suite of those. Strategic corridors, I've mentioned the A50, A500. We have a growing project with a growing range of partners who are increasingly excited about the prospects for the A50, A500 corridor. That includes all of the local authorities along the 90-kilometre stretch that motorway encompasses, so from Cheshire East through to Leicestershire. We've also engaged Deloitte to work with the major businesses along that route in terms of their needs, and we'll shortly be publishing a report that Deloitte prepared for us, which demonstrates the opportunities that businesses see along that route, which are many and varied, but with that very interesting hydrogen technologies element to it, which is, again, something that is of international significance. We're also at the stage now where we're starting to talk to government about that as a serious opportunity for their investment, and I'm pleased to say that we're getting a positive initial response from them. So that is the principal corridor activity, but it is not the only corridor that's important to us. So I'd highlight there the A38, A5 and A34 as other significant corridors within the county. But the A50 500 is the largest investment opportunity and will help us to unlock some of the others if we get that one delivered. So that runs us through the priorities. I think that's probably a point where I should stop, if only because the clock is ticking away. But hopefully that gives you a flavour of what we've been doing to deliver on the economic strategy, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Anthony, have you got anything to add? That's very unlike you. David.
Chairman, I will try not to talk as long as Philip, but I had an absolutely fascinating day yesterday. Not that I want to make a great point about it, but I'm a doctor of the Staffordshire University, and I do wish that as a council we would recognise more often the tremendous things that are going on as far as innovation is concerned within the Staffordshire University. and much more creative activity than there is perhaps in other universities that we as a council mention. I would particularly like to say thank you for the way that we have worked on a problem site that we have within my division, which is now starting to come together. And I've mentioned before the 20 UV charging point station, and also the new regional headquarter for a housing company, and in particular 10 acres of high-tech manufacturing sites, which will be quite unique, so I understand, to anything else in Staffordshire. But going on yesterday, I look at the world ranking of the Stafford University on various specialities, and I think that we have a great opportunity to be able to embrace the university. I looked yesterday at 3D printing, which they're doing, which they are, in terms of universities, I think now 24th in the world in terms of their advances that they're making. I also saw some absolutely tremendous interactive scenery for theatrical use, where you can interactively change the backdrop in a theatre, and I think that's quite exciting. Tremendous work in ceramics, which you would expect within Stoke-on-Trent. And I just think that there is so much that's happening that probably it's beyond our capability to be able to embrace everything. But I do so enjoy going to meet students and going to see developments at universities. And I thank you for the things that you're able to do within that particular area.
Yep, so just briefly coming back on that, one of the difficult things in doing these presentations is try not to be overlong, because there are always things that you miss out. So I work regularly with Martin Jones, and the team at the university are fantastic, as you say. We do lots of things with them. We'd love to do more. They're a huge asset to Staffordshire. I think you've highlighted some of the key areas where they really do punch. They do very sort of they're in the upper echelons, and particularly I'd highlight digital there. I think that's the one that's the absolute standout. But there are many other things they do really well, so they're a huge asset to our county and our economy.
Bernard.
Thank you. Philip, the West Midlands interchange is due to start to be developed. That's, 8 to 10,000 jobs were being promised for that area. But if the rail link is not progressed before all these people and lorries start appearing at that site, all hell's going to break loose. Because already we're absolutely swamped by traffic now. And it's very possible, when you think about it, that more infrastructure needs to be made and built if the rail link is not completed. Now, we don't hear a thing at all about the rail link. Hear everything else about the buildings that are going up, the large buildings. We need to know more and have some kind of guarantee about that rail link and when it will be started, because we haven't got that now.
So we can arrange an update for county councillors in the locality, including you, Bernard. There was an update meeting that was hosted by Staffordshire District Council. I think it was about 6 months ago, and particularly useful there, we had the new owners, who I think is Oxford Investments, who came with a very different attitude, I think it's fair to say, from the previous owners. And they, I wouldn't I wouldn't want to be too strong in terms of the difference, but I think the previous owners, I think saw it as something that they were going to build and sell on, whereas Oxford Investments are looking at it as something that they're going to own and operate for a long time. And the attitude that comes with that has been a much better one in terms of wanting to provide a better quality of facility. So particularly addressing those issues that the community is going to have with all of those vehicle movements in and out, and making sure there aren't lorries queuing on local roads. And the other point they were very clear on is that they're well aware that the development consent order from the Secretary of State that allows the construction of that site requires them to construct the rail link. They're well aware of that. They cannot ignore that, so the rail link has to be built before they build the site out. I think the reason why you've probably not heard anything about it is because it's a non-issue as far as they're concerned. They know they've got to do that. The development consent order isn't effective unless they deliver on that condition. I don't think I've missed anything there, have I, Anthony?
No, I think it's fair. It's fair to say that we will talk to them and get a more definitive timetable around when the rail link's going to be implemented. But they do seem to be a much more responsible developer. And we are building up a strong relationship, and I think we probably need to come back with that information.
But I think the action that we'll take from that is we'll arrange a briefing for members in the locality so that you can get that update. We might see if we can get the developer along to that, and then you can get it from the horse's mouth. Okay.
Graham?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, very separate. Recently we've had elections, and I was fortunate enough to campaign right across North Staffordshire, and one thing that came back time and time again on the doorstep was, well, people have had all this money over the last 2 years and levelling up, and what they've done with it? Nothing. That came across loud and clear. So anything that county can do to pressurise where funds are going. Now, I know you signed off the Rycroft site this morning, but I'm just saying as an example, that's one example, but there must be loads. And if people don't see the change happening, it doesn't matter what we say, oh, there's a plan for that. They're not interested. They want to see spades in the ground, diggers, new things going up. That's what they want to see. And they will not believe whatever we say. So anything we can do, we've got county council elections in 2 years, anything we can do in the next 2 years to hurry that investment so that people can see it and that we have delivered. Otherwise, people won't believe us. Second point, how many truck companies have we got involved in the hydrogen project? I know there's not many trucks manufactured in this country anymore, but the 4 biggest truck companies in the world are, I think, Mercedes, Volvo, PACCAR, and the Fiat one. So are any of those involved? Because hydrogen is about, for transport, is about mainly about long-distance transport, where electric vehicles are inappropriate. So do we have any interest from the 4 big truck companies in our hydrogen project? Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. So on the regeneration schemes, whilst the priorities in the economic strategy are not in any particular order generally, I don't think it's a coincidence that the town centres is top, because whatever forum you're in, wherever you go, the thing that you consistently hear about Staffordshire is that it's an absolutely great place in pretty much every respect, other than the condition of our towns, which needs some work. And I think that's the reason why, along with the energy and enterprise and excellence of our various local authorities, that we've received so much funding for that regeneration, is because we're in an area of the country where that's required. So it is an extremely high priority for us. I'm sat next to a regeneration expert. When we recruited Anthony, we didn't realise that we were going to be doing so much of this in Staffordshire, because it's one strand of his role, but he's been a useful man to have around, and I'm sure if Anthony was answering this question, the first thing he'd say to you is regeneration projects take time. And the phase that we've had to go through with all of these regeneration schemes has been a very heavy level of governance and public consultation, which has taken an enormous amount of time. And it's very frustrating. Speaking as someone who sits on a lot of the boards that have delivered that, you're chomping at the bit to get the shovels in the ground and the cranes on the skyline. We're only just getting to that point now. The key is going to be now to drive that delivery through, and also to make sure that the costs don't escalate too much, because of course whilst we've been going through all of that governance, inflation's been going up, hasn't it? But it's all about delivery now, and the government's very clear. Whilst we have to focus on delivery full stop, it's clear that government has set a timetable for these schemes, which runs to the next general election, which is when their mandate gets renewed or runs out, doesn't it? So if we haven't spent the money by then on things that are delivered, well, Treasury's having it back. So it's quite clear when it's got to be done by. On the point about hydrogen and transport, I think the one thing I do have to say is that whilst we are pulling all of this together as an investment proposition for government, what we are pulling together is the activities of various private enterprises and universities. So along the A50, A500 corridor, we've got JCB, Rolls-Royce, Alstom and Toyota, who are all developing engines to put into things using hydrogen. We don't have a truck manufacturer on that corridor at the moment. It would be a very good thing, wouldn't it, if one of them wanted to relocate there in the future because of the excellence in manufacturing and innovation that's represented there. But that's not part of the mix at the moment. If we get to where we want to with it, perhaps that's something that might come in the future. It'd be nice to have a bus manufacturer there as well. And you're spot on in terms of it being for long journeys and for heavy vehicles. Those are the things that are mainly represented there. Passenger vehicles, Toyota will sell you a hydrogen saloon. But for that to be rolled out comprehensively would require a complete reconfiguration of our fueling network. At the moment, it is easier to plug your car in at home than it is to get to a hydrogen site. So maybe that for the future, but yes, for heavier vehicles and longer journeys, hydrogen's the way, and we've got those assets in our part of the world.
Pippa.
Thank you. Just some little questions, really. During lockdown, a lot of parents were aware that their mathematical skills, numeracy skills were worse than their children, myself included. I'm just wondering if we're using the schools as a way to push that out to parents, so a soft approach rather than it being shoved down people's throats almost about maths, because people find it quite daunting. So is it going to be pushed through the local primary schools as well as the high schools for the parents to pick up on the skills? You mentioned about the Shire Hall shopping centre and the hot desks almost. Just wondered if that's linking back into the My Own Boss and Ignite programme as well, to get them to put their business models into a building that's local to us.
So on the on Multiply and the schemes to encourage adult numeracy, we're not specifically using schools as a driver for that, although all of our schools are aware of Multiply and can promote that with their parents if they want to. A lot of schools will encourage a degree of family learning anyway, and through our adult community learning offer, one of the big strands of that is also family learning, so getting the different generations doing things together. We've got a very detailed delivery plan for Multiply in terms of how we're promoting that and where. I don't hold all of that in my head, but we do have a man at the back of the room who does. So, Tony, do you maybe want to say a couple of words about that? And then I'll come on to your other point.
Thank you, Philip. The Multiply programme, as Philip said, aimed at improving adult numeracy, and so we've taken an approach to try and pilot different route ways into getting into the adult market around, which is something which is probably quite hard to sell to people to go and improve the sort of numeracy and mathematical skills. And so we've got a range of different providers that we're working with, both voluntary, community, private training providers and colleges who are trying and testing different ways to engage adults in the numeracy. One of the sort of big successful ones is things we've been doing, so at Newcastle and Stafford College through their Lego centres. So those Lego Innovation Centres attract primary young people, and as part of that, the parents, etc., come along. So it's trying to find new ways of getting people engaged in that programme, as well as working with the Chamber of Commerce to look at businesses and how we work with the adult workforce, and then working at some key client groups. And of course, we do have an extensive adult community learning programme anyway that covers functional English and maths. And so we have got that read across and those linkages there in terms of taking place. And there's, you may have seen, lots of different campaigns going on around numeracy activities and things. We've been trying to help people with cost of living and things like that, and budgeting and stuff like that, just to try and get the sort of that reach out there. And of course, a lot of our other adult programs as well have sort of things like digital numeracy, English language skills embedded in them courses. So if you're doing, a science or engineering or a craft or woodworking course, there will be elements of numeracy and things like that in those as well. So it is, a broad offer in that sense. But the Multiply programme in particular is something we've got over a 3-year window, and it is something we're trying to grow and try and diversify our routes and ways to engage people with. So as we move through the programme, we'll see it develop and evolve as things become more successful.
So what we will take away as an action from that, though, is to look specifically at whether we can promote Multiply to schools. We've got a very efficient way of talking to schools. It's called the Schools Bag. You've obviously come across it, so it's pretty easy for us to do that, and so we'll take that away as an action to see what more we can do on that front, because it's a good suggestion. Regarding the various business startup and step up support schemes and enterprise centres, the same team run both. It's under Nicola Kent, and so there's a constant dialogue there in both directions, whether that's businesses that we're helping to get going, where we're looking at premises for them, or whether it's businesses that are looking to come into our enterprise centres, where we'll be talking to them about their broader needs. So it works quite nicely in that respect. So I can give you a really clear answer on that one.
Can I just ask then, can that be shared with Cannock Chase District Council for when they're doing their levelling up for the town centre as well, please?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I'm on their levelling up board, which has paused temporarily, but we've got a very free flow of communication with them. Anthony, I'll ask you to pick that up as an action. Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay, we've got 3 recommendations that Philip read out at the start. We consider the update on progress, we consider the interventions already made, we invite the Deputy Leader back in 6 months' time. Are we in agreement with that? All those? Yes? That's brilliant. We'll see you before 6 months, Philip, I'm sure, but on this topic, 6 months' time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input. And we will move straight on to digital infrastructure, and I believe that Philip and Idris are going to do this.
Yes, I think I'm your Simon Tagg for the rest of the afternoon, aren't I? This is an area of work that I'm familiar with, so I will try and do as much of this as I can myself, but I will probably lean a little bit more on Idris and Tony than I did in the last item. So I want to make sure that everything is as detailed and correct as it can be as we go through the report. But this is another 6-monthly update on the activity in terms of digital infrastructure delivery in Staffordshire. The digital infrastructure framework that was presented as part of the digital infrastructure in Staffordshire report and that the committee looked at in April 2022 was agreed by Cabinet in June of last year. It set out a number of key objectives, and the delivery of those is the topic for us to scrutinise today. In terms of the objectives here, fundamentally what we're looking at here is Project Gigabit, which is nationally run by Building Digital UK, which I think we're going to be calling BD UK for the rest of this, which is an executive agency of the DCMS. So their mission is to ensure that homes and businesses across the UK can access fast and reliable digital connectivity. Project Gigabit is their project to deliver that, working with local authority partners and others. And in May 2022, we carried out a market engagement exercise with them for Staffordshire to identify intervention areas that required subsidy to deliver gigabit or better broadband delivery. And since that time, we've been working with BD UK on a range of initiatives to deliver that. So in terms of the scale of the challenge, we've ascertained that there are around 435,000 premises in Staffordshire that are relevant to this programme where subsidy consideration should be given. Of those, we've identified 51,000 that are ready for intervention, i.e. there should be a subsidy to help them to get that gigabit or better broadband connectivity. And there are another 105 premises that are currently under review. As a consequence of that work, BD UK are in the process of launching a procurement to subsidise gigabit delivery to 5,400 premises in Staffordshire Moorlands and I quite like this, North East Staffordshire. So we've created a new mini district. But basically that's the bit of North Staffordshire, of East Staffordshire that connects onto the moorlands above Uttoxeter and running up towards Ashbourne. So the most rural part of our county, 5,400 premises there. And I think we can all see why those might be areas where it's not commercially viable to deliver gigabit broadband without that subsidy. In addition to that, BD UK will soon be launching another procurement for around 10,800 properties around the rest of the county. And we're also working with BD UK and suppliers on voucher and subsidy projects for about another 4,800 premises. So we've got about 20,000 of those 51,000 premises that we're already taking action on. As a part of ongoing sub-regional procurement, so over wider geographical areas, there are also two broader intervention areas that are currently being worked on. I think they call them gigahubs. And one of those is led by Nottinghamshire County Council and the other by the Department for Education, looking at premises that fall into particular categories, so schools and health centres, to be subsidised for gigabit connectivity. In addition to that, we still have the government's gigabit voucher scheme, which is running, that looks to provide vouchers for the owners of premises to use to obtain gigabit broadband. We have 21 communities, 1,179 premises that have gone live using that voucher support, with another 6 communities and 947 premises in the pipeline to do that, and another 5 communities with 320 premises that have been approved for that but are not yet in the pipeline. There are a variety of other much more localised interventions that are detailed in the report as well, which I'm sure you'll all have read about. But that broadly covers the interventions that are there. I think in terms of the analogue lines withdrawal and the access and adoption update, they're slightly more technical. So with your permission, Chair, I might ask Idris to cover those so that I don't make a hash of them. Would that be all right? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me go through the reason I'd got Droington and Lee Heath in there, the piece that Philip just ended up with, is that it took 2 years of working with the community around Droington and Lee Heath to get them connected up. And what happens is that when we talked about the Type A and Type C procurements that BDUK are doing, they tend to take larger communities, and yet smaller communities of 24 houses suddenly feel that they're excluded. So that is something that my team tries to concentrate on. In order to make it even commercially successful with the vouchers, we had to bring 2 communities together, work with BDUK and work with Openreach in order to get that delivery. So I'm happy to say that, as you can see in the report, that that was successful. Right, and in fact there's one business that said I was able to stay within the community and not have to move because of the broadband connectivity. So I think that's important. When we move on along to the analogue lines, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but Openreach are within the next 2 years going to take away analogue lines service. So those of you who had plain old telephone services where you would lift up the phone, get dial tone, and even if you lost power in the house, dial tone would remain. Those are the plain old telephone services, and that service has been withdrawn. It's being withdrawn because it's quite expensive to maintain. It was designed in the 60s and 70s and has been there for a long time. So Ofcom have agreed that it's going to be withdrawn. This is not a council issue or a government issue. It's an Ofcom and an Openreach issue. However, when we went through we did an audit internally. There's about 600 lines that the council currently rents that are analogue lines. Departments are aware of that, and we now have replacement policies to replace those lines. We also are worried about then vulnerable groups who tend to have a lot of these lines. A lot of the emergency buttons that vulnerable people have around them tend to use these systems. So we are working with Catherine Mann and making sure that vulnerable groups are getting that message out to those communities. That was quite important for us. I'm also working with the Civil Contingencies Unit. For those of you who remember, there was a Storm Arwen last year for communities up in Scotland. When the power went out for over a week, after mobile phones stopped working, right, they were in a lot of trouble, those who just, stayed on digital, as it were. The analogue lines worked fine. So that is an issue for the Civil Contingencies Unit. So we're working with those and how that will move forward. And the piece that I brought up with Cabinet was the fact that there is something to be thinking around digital resilience. So the more that as an authority, and in fact, as a country, we head towards this digital world, we just need to be thinking about how resilient we are. Right? So a lot of things around cyber security, a lot of things about how information is retained. Those are policy decisions for you to be thinking about. I have no recommendations, but it's just a warning that came to my mind as I was going through this piece of audit. Right, moving on in terms of then the, so let me just get my notes back up to I think. So then I wanted to just go through why are we doing this, right? Because, I'm spending a lot of time putting in digital connectivity into the county. A recent article, I think came a little bit earlier, was published by Smart Insights that says those who have digital skills, on average, get paid 29% more than those who don't. We'll be aware, and I've got it in the report, that in order to apply for a lot of jobs now, and I know one of the councillors brought it up yesterday, today, around about lots of jobs being created, most of those will be released digitally. So we need to be concentrating on digital skills for the people in the county, and as a part of that, I think we've been signposting that as part of the access and adoption. So we're concentrating on that as a piece moving forward. The other bit I got in there, and I know I've just passed over because I just got myself a bit mixed up because the slides aren't what I was expecting. We've also been working with the network providers. There was a question about pavements and reinstatement going on. And I know Councillor Williams was particularly concerned with the fact that we could have up to 17 different alternative network suppliers digging up our pavements, and then 17 different types of reinstatements. First of all, although there are 17 different organisations interested in investing in Staffordshire in terms of network deployment, they won't all do it in one location. They're interested in different areas. So we have people coming down from the north, if you like, east, west and south. So it's unlikely we'd ever have more than 4 organisations doing that. But in working with the Highways Department, I've included it in the report, we've created a Staffordshire approach that we're sharing with each of the network suppliers to be saying, if you are going to be digging up the highways in Staffordshire as part of deploying fibre, if you like, then this is what we expect of you. But in return, this is what you can expect from us as well. I think that's quite important to allay some of the fears around that area. The other bit, just going back to why we're doing this, I've estimated using some figures from BD UK that digital, in essence, going digital is worth about £1.3 billion worth of gross value added between now and 2030. If we did nothing, if we didn't do this, it'd probably still be worth about £600 or £700 million. But the going digital, right, adds between, I put it there, between 280 and £500 million. So that is why we're continuing to do this programme. But not only are we doing fixed lines, if you like, we're also doing mobile pieces as well. We're part of a sub-regional procurement to be looking at how we can improve coverage in the county. One of the areas that people tend to do is when you're looking at your mobile contract is to be having a look at price. Sometimes it's necessary to be looking at coverage, especially if you're an inward investor and communications is key to what you're doing. You know, the chair knows that I normally say there'll be 1 million devices per square kilometre trying to get access to the internet in the next 8 years. Right? So where people are deploying 4G and 5G and even 6G communications in the future will become key. And we need to be aware of where they are and start to point some of those things out. We're also working with central government on an accelerator programme in order to be looking at what sites we have as a county council that we can offer up to be deploying the 4G, 5G and potentially 6G. They call that densification. So that is to allow better coverage of mobile using some of our... It's a revenue generator, which is a good thing for us, but also if we can, is to prevent those massive towers that you're starting to see around. We can't stop those that have permitted development rights to be able to do that, but if we can get them to be putting more, but in lower sites, I think that'll be visually better. So it's another piece of work that we are doing. And finally, in the report, we talk about investing in an Internet of Things. And again, that, I think, forms part of what we're doing. So what does this really mean? And some of the things that was interesting came up today during our conversations. So we look at consumer Internet of Things, such as wearables. One of the interesting things that we've been trying to get hold of is the Health Information Centre at Staffordshire University, investment and Blackheath Lane. Right, and start to be talking about how technology-enabled care can start to interface and how you start to link primary care and secondary care together. And these are the initiatives that I think digital starts to bring up. And our part in that is to be making sure that the more remote areas of the county aren't left behind. There's enterprise Internet of Things, which includes smart factories and precision agriculture. But it's just that we start to look really about creativity and innovation in the county. So we're doing that with the Digital Programme Board. And then you've got public spaces, so that kind of waste management, environmental monitors. So we talked about gullies a little bit earlier. These pieces of technologies now are quite cheap, so as you can start to see and find out very quickly where flooding might be taking place. So these are some of the areas of benefit that I think the digital technology is moving us forward on. Okay, I rushed that a little bit probably, but there we are, that's the report. Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Idris. I'm going to give you a starter for 10. We we talk about connecting some of our most vulnerable residents. Where do we stand with care homes and things like that? I know that not everybody in a care home is going to want to be on a laptop or a mobile phone, but some people will. You know, the sheltered accommodation especially. So do we work with care homes and the elderly, for an example?
Specifically, that wouldn't be my remit. That would be Richard Harling's remit in terms of how that kind of works. What we are doing, though, is that we are working with the organisations around multiple dwelling units. So what tends to happen there is large companies tend to want to avoid multiple dwelling units because they are hard to get the way leaves to start to go, you know, putting cables all over the area. I think that will start to really have an impact when we start to have that link between the technology-enabled care that I talked about before, when they really start to need that, and the individual people, you know, the people under care, start to then say, I want my piece of technology that is mine in here. I think that's when we'll start to see that happening.
And just quickly, we've had the conversation about Google Homes before and how many devices people have in a home. I counted mine and I've got over 100 because my house is a Google house. There's no light switches, there's no keys to the house as such. It's all been done to future-proof for a disabled husband. I probably have been hacked by Russians, yeah, but who cares? So, you know, how are we working with people, with companies like Google and, what's the other one? Microsoft, Alexa and all them, because people are using more of these devices.
So yeah, so we've been talking with Microsoft. We have an offer from BT to go down to Adastral Park, which is their research and development area, to be talking about how we can benefit from the technologies. And it's this idea of looking forward, which is why we're looking at the Internet of Things. We've also spoken to the South London Partnership, which is 5 boroughs, where they've come together to start to say, how can we use technology to benefit the citizens in different ways? As I pointed out to the people in South London Partnership, there were 5 large boroughs with about 1.2 million people over something like about 30 square miles. We're about 800,000 people over 1,000 square miles. Our challenges are different, right? But it's right that we start to talk about those things, because in the home, 200 devices per home, as I talk about, that's really important. But it starts to become more important about what you do between the communities, which is why we're talking with the mobile network operators about the coverage that they're putting into the economic highways. You know, as Councillor White was talking about, the A50, the A38, the A449, the A5, the M42 to a certain extent. And so that becomes key about how we encourage their investment in our county.
Sam or Pippa, who was waving?
You mentioned analogue lines. If they're going to be decommissioned, is there a possibility, if needed, that they can be recommissioned in the future, just in case we need them? The digital skills promotion, is that going out via libraries to reach the generations that don't necessarily have access to internet? And the 16 providers, we've already seen 3 in the Cannock Chase district come through already, but we weren't given much notice that they were coming in, so we couldn't prepare our residents for it. So anything on the communication side of there that we can soften the blow of the disruption, because pavements, roads and everything, as we already talked about in highways, is a massive disruption. So any communication on that side of it beforehand would be a massive advantage for us.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Let me do the questions in reverse order, because I think I missed the first one. The 17 organisations that we talk about in Leek, I know you've got a lot, you're very popular up in Leek. One of the things that we talk about within the Staffordshire approach is that communications piece. Right now, within the access area of ours, we have a Twitter feed called Full Fibre Friday. So we're trying to warn people who are coming in and start to talk about which areas are going to be affected. I don't think we have as many people following us as we'd probably like, but we've got that. We also have the Gigafast Staffordshire website as well, that again tries to inform people of where that is going. Including in that is also how to get hold of the libraries to talk about digital skills, of course. A bit of an oxymoron there in order to have the digital skills to get on, but we are working with libraries, so we're encouraging people when they come into libraries to be saying, look, you've got these sites, you can move on, and you can move on from there. And I missed the first question.
It was just with regards to analogue lines, if they're being if they could they be reinstated if needed?
No. Right. Once they go, they've gone. Right.
So, if I may, Chair, one of the strands of work that we're developing at the moment is looking at civil contingencies and resilience as a county. It's in its very early stages, but resilience of our communications network is a good example of the sort of thing that we want to look at there, and just make sure that we're actively assuring ourselves that everything there is as it should be. The pandemic was a big opportunity, wasn't it, to learn some lessons in terms of those things that you think might never happen. And where as an organisation we've got lots of strands of work that are ongoing in different areas that we'd like to pull together more. So it's something that we're concerned about, and communication would be a good example of that. Just one other small point, just on the economics of putting in this digital infrastructure, and Idris will kick me under the table if I'm wrong on this, but the profit motive which drives providers digging up the roads and pavements and putting in these lines, generally if you're the third one in, it's probably pretty marginal as to whether you're going to make any money from it. So once you've got a couple who've dug up your streets, maybe you'll get a third. After that, you can probably breathe a sigh of relief, and unless there's some extraordinary area. So hopefully Cannock may have seen most of its troubles from that. I think I'm correct in that, aren't I, Idris?
Yeah, you are quite correct, but a leak seems to be a challenging area that it's very popular. I think there's 4 or 5 who might end up in leak. But it is right. I spoke to the finance director of VX Fibre, who are Leela Connect in Stoke, and he was talking about the economics of the issue. And Councillor White is absolutely right. After about 4, it's just economic. You can never catch up in order to make any money out of it.
David.
Chairman, I look at the hill we have to climb, both from your point of view and also from my point of view. I have absolutely no idea whether I'm a digital body or an analog body. I know that my mobile phone is 4G. I know when I press the computer button it comes on. It sometimes takes a little time, it's quite slow sometimes, but it's fast enough for me at my age. And I mention my age because I work with a group of 50 people who are perhaps my age or a little older. And yes, they all have computers or have mobile phones, but they use them to access WhatsApp to talk to the family. They don't look at websites. They're not conversant with so many of the things that we think they all ought to be automatically conversant with. And also, my home is, like many in the county, one of 9 fairly spread out houses that are within 200 yards of a fibre box, yet we don't have fibre connection. I just wonder how we're going to actually deal with the sort of remote hundreds of people who are like me, who don't have a fibre connection, and seems as though it's extremely unlikely we're going to get a fibre connection. Or perhaps, having asked the question, you're going to tell me how wrong I am.
I'm hoping you're slightly wrong. In the report, I forecast that We're going to have 85% availability by 2025 in the next 2 years. That was a real target set by Prime Minister Johnson when he was in there, that BD UK are having to move quite quickly to try and meet. At the moment, within Staffordshire, we're about 69%, of which fibre is about 42%, because some of it's gigabit capable that you can do over copper. We think we're going to get to about 99.5% by 2030. The reason there's always a very hard to reach element that you can either get to using something called fixed wireless access, of which there's a Staffordshire company called Obideo who supply that kind of connectivity to Shell buildings, the petroleum company, or Elon Musk has done low orbit satellites. So the connectivity, I think, will have 100% availability by 2030 to people. In terms of the fibre connectivity, I think we'll be in the upper 90s by 2030, and we'll have 85% availability by 2025. You know, we could say that about all of us, but I think what to answer your question, one of the things that it starts to do is, I know one of our strategic objectives is healthy and independent living. With the piece, and I mentioned that about Staffordshire University at Blackheath Lane and the health innovation centre there, it's that technology-enabled care about wearables, monitoring, especially people who suffer from falls. These are the sorts of pieces of technology that I think in the house, such as Chair was talking about, we are going to start more and more seeing in people's houses, which makes them, I think, would allow them to stay more in their houses than move into care homes. That's the advantage of the technology, I think. How we persuade people, how we move that forward, that's going to be an interesting piece, I think, moving forward over the next 5 years, 10 years, but I think it's worthwhile doing.
How do I find out if I'm digital or analog compatible?
If you've got a router in the house, you're digital.
Sorry,
if you've got a router, a computer router, so if you've got your computer, normally you are, I'd say you're digital, right? If all you've got in your house is a telephone, you lift it up and you get dial tone, and it still works when the power is off, then you're analog. Very few analog lines are left, but a lot of people in vulnerable communities still have those lines, have never gone to computer. It's about 5.3 million people in the UK who still haven't got connectivity, digital connectivity.
Graham.
Thank you. Like David, I live about 400 yards from a box which is owned by Openreach. They're the only provider on my road because we're in the country. And I've asked Openreach technicians how long would it be before I can get full fibre to the house. And they said between 10 and 15 years. Or you can have it tomorrow if you pay. And it's quite expensive. It's over £200 just to string a... that's... They said you can have it tomorrow if you pay, but nobody else is going to pay for you. For at least 10 to 15, and 6G will be out by then, and we won't need fibre in the ground.
One of the pieces I tried to point out in the report when we looked at Lee Heath and Droington is that in order for them to receive fibre connectivity, the government at the time was offering £1,500 voucher to households and £3,500 to businesses. So when we were talking with BD UK, it was then to be saying to the community, please accept these vouchers. When that service is in, please then pay BT. So that was £1,500 per household. BD UK in their last report have said we're now doing £4,500 per household or business in order to get that. But that only starts to become feasible when you come together as a community. One of the first communities in the UK that's going to go through the new scheme is Bobbington. They have 300 premises in there. We need about 100 of those to sign up to the £4,500 voucher in order to deliver fibre to that community. At the moment, we're about 20-25, but we've only just started, been going about 2 weeks. So there are ways to get it quicker with having the government pay.
Is it possible to email me that scheme and I'll see if I can get it in my area then?
Sure, I'll do that.
Members, can we use our microphones, please? Tony?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, one of the key issues or challenge the team face is around that bringing communities together and that community leadership role to take advantage of these voucher schemes. So the process generally from when we start that engagement and addressing an issue in a locality to when it actually gets deployed is 18 months to 2 years' time. And the way the voucher schemes work is they rely on individual households or premises, if it's a businesses, signing up as a group to basically effectively block purchase in that community. And so where we really need help and support, and it's one of the things that's going to feature on one of the upcoming members' away days, is around actually some of the work that we do in these local communities, how you can then promote that opportunity and help to find those community champions who'll bring, you know, households and business together in a locality to promote actually that. There's funding there, it's $4,500 per premise now, so there's quite a lot of funding there available, but actually some of the barriers, actually the cost implications, you know, are potentially hundreds of thousands in some localities. And so what we want to do with that session is really, you know, equip you with the information of what's available, what support's available for people to get that fibre connectivity, and then be able to promote it and find ways for communities to come together as that broader piece of doing that. We have a small team, you know, who promote things generally digitally, but obviously with all the members' connections in their local communities and indeed parish councils, we could actually, you know, move this agenda on a lot quickly by bringing people together to take advantage of those vouchers and that government support.
Pippa?
It was just to follow up from the question earlier. With regards to the digital skills promotion, could you share the links for Twitter and different social media skills that you're using so we can... I'm just thinking more that we can then put that straight onto our social medias straight off.
Sure.
Because it doesn't always allow you to copy and paste off these documents.
Okay, yes, true enough. Okay.
Are there any further questions, Peter?
Yeah, thank you. What's the minimum number of houses that can sign up to the scheme? And what happens if you got a remote, like I've got one in my area, that's remote and it's miles away from anywhere? So if they wanted full fibre, what will they do? Thank you.
The smallest one we've done, I think, is it's just outside Burton-on-Trent. There's 8 premises. Sinai House is one of those, so if you know that sort of area, just kind of north of the A38, so it's just the other side, so it's not far from the new school. Is it James Taylor School? John Taylor School, sorry, thank you. Yeah, so it's just south of that. It was a gated community, 8 houses, they'd just been left behind, and so we did it with 8 houses. Again, using the voucher, so all 8 had to sign up. Once it was delivered, you know, they then took the service, and that was it.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Tony?
I just wanted to add, Chair, that I think over the number of sessions we've had since we developed the digital infrastructure strategy, and we've seen that evolve now, and we have the full team in place for over a year now, you can see the progress we're beginning to make on a number of fronts now. You know, moving from that legacy Superfast program into a Gigafast scheme where we're pushing ahead. We've got some assurance now around the scale of the challenge and indeed in terms of the number of premises that we need to, you know, support in getting that access, and we're getting some, you know, further, you know, comfort and assurance through, you know, the work we're doing with BD UK, identifying those premises and bringing those on stream through working with them and their procurements, as well as working with the commercial operators and through things we've done with the sort of barrier busting approach and our sort of work locally around that. And in particular, you can see some of the sort of, you know, the technicalities and the nuances that, you know, need to be taken into account in rolling, you know, the programme forward. But also I think what we'll begin to see over the sort of next year, 18 months, as Idris has shaped up, there's no point putting all this infrastructure in place if we don't take advantage of it. We've talked about the economic benefits into potentially hundreds of millions that we can see get returned into the county, supporting that prosperity agenda and growth, but also as well get people to take advantage of it and use it for how we you know, live, work, learn and be healthy and happy, and the opportunities that brings. So as we sort of get more assured around that connectivity, be it infrastructure getting put in place, making sure then people can access it and then begin to use it will be the push really over the next 18 months as we go forward. So we'll hope to be able to bring you, you know, stories of success around where we get communities connected up, but also actually focus on examples where we can use different technologies, not just fibre, to improve access, as well as the different advantages it brings to the way we live, work and learn. So hopefully that'll be the features going forward.
Thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, we've got 2 recommendations. That we endorse the update and approach being taken in deploying the digital infrastructure strategic framework, and B, note. We don't do note. Don't do note. The further areas of consideration and improvement being developed in support of the Council's overall digital first strategy. Happy with those? Yeah. Apart from the word note. We never note on reports. All those in favour? That's carried. You're free to go. And we'll move on to our last item, which is the work programme. Jonathan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's pretty much as set out in the schedule. We're still endeavouring to locate a member that can come and be scrutinised in connection with the Stafford bus strategy. Hopefully it could be Mr Williams, but if not, it might be Councillor Pritchard. Had details yesterday of an item Councillor Price would like to bring for scrutiny in July, which is the strategy for special needs provision. Councillor Price has confirmed that he is able to attend. So, with your permission, Chairman,
Yes.
I'd add them to
That
the
was
list.
That was raised at the work programming meeting as well.
It was. Okay. And I've also had details of a potential item for November, but I won't share details yet because we don't know whether the relevant cabinet member is going to be available. So,
and we've got maybe the 2 items from the transformation programme to discuss.
Yeah. So, with your permission, Chairman, if the committee want to leave, you know, decision whether to add this potential item in November to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
To the later meeting.
Yeah.
Members, I will tell you now, we've only got 7 meetings from the work planning programme we did on Friday. It's not going to be enough. So you need to be checking your emails when Jonathan sends out dates for new meetings, and obviously we'll do them as fair as we can, trying to distribute them and hopefully not all on the same times and days so it doesn't affect certain people. But we are struggling to get extra dates in. So please, when Jonathan sends you those, please accept or decline as soon as you can so we know where we stand with those. And there isn't anything else. Michael, did you... Oh, Graham?
Say, if you want me to sit on the subcommittee, as Darryl was saying, then I'm happy to do so. Was my area of expertise looking at you know, I used to be a management consultant, as you probably know.
Yes. So he's going to bring us a couple of items, and then we're going to work out if we need a work programme to discuss the other 22. Was it 24, he said? So there's nothing else. Oh, sorry, yes. Proposed scrutiny review, civil parking enforcement. We've all received the inquiry day report. We need to decide how we take it forwards. Do we want volunteers for a working group to discuss the way forward? Jonathan?
So the report was just to add a bit of transparency, Chairman, because your inquiry day was held in private. The other question was, I don't know whether you want like a spread of members from the county on to serve on this working group. I mean, part of the evidence gathering session might be to either survey all of the members or, you know, get members' views from each area of the county. So if you can't include members from each area from the committee, it's not a complete disaster.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We've got 8 districts, so ideally 1 member from each district. If they sit on this committee, great. If they don't, even better. Are we all happy with that?
I think we've got Councillor Hayden and Thompson had indicated previously.
So discuss amongst yourselves who wants to do it. So we get 1 per district. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, but I mean, if both want to sit on, that's fine by
We
me.
know they come as a double act.
Right.
We conjoined.
Okay, so if we're happy with that, if you can send something out and we can get 1 member from each district would be great. And obviously the date of the next meeting is Thursday the 6th of July at 10 a.m. in the morning. And that's the end of today's meeting, so I'll call it to a close at 16:55 and thank you for your attendance today. Thank you very much.